honest working man was never treated well from his wife, but when he won a huge amount of money, this happened. Every day, Robert walked to the steel and tolling of the factory in Cedar Ridge town. The constant hum of machines was only matched by the anger he felt at home. His wife, Emily, was very good at putting him down with every word. Her comments were sharper than the glass shards he had to handle at work. His boys, Jake and Ethan, had picked up on his mother's dislike for him, and would always find a reason to point out what they thought were his flaws. Emily sneered at Robert one night. "You can't even take care of your family right." Her dislike towards Robert was obvious as always. "Emily, just calm down." Robert answered, "I'm doing the best I can." His shoulders sagged from the weight of her words. A man can only handle so much. It was easy to notice the sadness and hopelessness in his eyes. Robert found relief in Alinda when things got tough at work and at home. In the strangest of places, their relationship grew when they both went through hard times. Robert was like a brother to Alinda, and was no stranger to the struggles of living a hard life. Alinda had dreams as big as the factory walls, but she didn't have the money to make them come true. Their friendship was a quiet protest against how harsh the factory was. Robert often heard Alinda's soft voice over the noise of the machines, and she would ask him simple questions during the day just to make him feel that he's not alone. Her lips were tightly pursed in a smile as she asked, "Hey Robert, want to get a coffee after our shift?" During those brief breaks, they talked about plans they had put off and hopes that were like faraway stars. Robert's hurt spirit was soothed by Alinda's understanding. It reminded him that even in the chaos of life, there were places of peace. A strange letter that showed up in Robert's mailbox. One ordinary morning, shook up his boring life. Cedar Ridge was like a wildfire with the news of an unexpected gift of $30 million from an uncle who had been forgotten for a long time. He thought of Alinda as the first person to tell about it. He approached her in a corner of the building, away from the curious eyes. He was nervous and excited at the same time. "Alinda, you'll not believe what happened. I got $30 million as an inheritance," Robert cried, a rare flash of happiness lighting up in his tired eyes. It was clear that Alinda was truly happy for her friend. Her words brought a warmth to Robert's life that had been missing for too long. But the happiness didn't last long, because Robert's family found out about his newfound wealth. "How does it feel to be a millionaire?" One night, Ethan sneered, and his words were filled with anger like poison. The change happened quickly and seemed almost magical. As word spread through their simple home that Robert was going to get a lot of money, the air seemed to sparkle with the promise of wealth. Emily, who used to be a tough critic, had changed into a sweet persona that confused Robert. "I always knew you had potential, Dad," Jake said with a sly smile. There was a hint of lying in his words. Jake seemed to have forgotten all the times he had agreed with his mother's harsh words towards Robert. Emily also took part of this new role to keep the peace in the family. In their small living room, she switched from criticizing to complimenting. It was like a trick dance. Once there was a lot of tension in the air, but now there was an unsettling calm. It was just a taste of the storm that was to come. Even so, Robert couldn't get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. The love seemed forced, like players in a play that wasn't well practiced and had trouble getting into their parts. As the family enjoyed the golden glow of their wealth, their real intentions began to come to light. The lies, which were skillfully woven into their desires, were complex and persuasive. Emily told stories with practiced fluency about strange illnesses that needed expensive medical care. "Robert, I can't believe it. It was so expensive to treat, and the doctor said it was a rare condition." She would complain as her eyes filled with fake tears. Jake and Ethan didn't want to be left out, so they made up their own stories. Jake pictured himself building a huge business empire that would need a lot of money to get off the ground. Ethan, on the other hand, saw himself studying abroad at the best schools. "I just want what's best for us, Robert," Emily would say. and her voice sounded like it was a mix of honesty and manipulation. When those things happened, Robert felt split between caring about his family and having a strong feeling that their greed was getting stronger. Their family relationship had changed from being hostile to a careful balancing act. They didn't know it yet, but the stage was set for a play that would shake their carefully built illusions to their very core. With the taste of their newfound wealth still fresh in their mouths, Robert's family was caught off guard by his choice. He was going to give back and use some of the money he got as a gift to help the community. His family was both shocked and angry when they heard the news. "Emily, we can't keep it all to ourselves. We have to give back," Robert said. Not only did he want to leave something for his family, but also for the place that had helped shape his life. Emily's eyes got narrow, and she looked suspicious. "Robert, we have needs. You know that kindness starts at home." But Robert was set in his ways. He saw a chance to make a difference and be a light of hope in a world that was full of bad things. He got his family together and told them about his plans for a better, nicer community. He wanted them to understand how great it is to give without expecting anything in return. The house became a battleground as the charitable donations flowed like a river through the once hallowed halls. "The charities can wait, Dad. We need the money more than they do," Ethan said. His words were like a spark that ignited the dissatisfaction that had taken place in the hearts of Emily and Jake. Robert, caught in the crossfire of conflicting priorities, felt the weight of his decisions pressing on him. On one side stood the selfless pull of humanity, a desire to make a positive impact on the world. On the other, the demands of a family increasingly dissatisfied with the apparent lack of abundance. As Robert tried to navigate the storm, the very foundations of their once tenacious harmony trembled. The question lingered in the air. Could the family weather the storm, or was their foundation destined to crumble beneath the weight of unmet expectations? The room was tense as Robert gathered his family for a moment that would change the course of their trip. Each member of the family was tensely waiting for the news. Robert took a big breath. His face showing that he was tired, he began. "I need to tell you all something." The truth he was about to reveal sounded heavy in his voice. Emily, Jake, and Ethan all had their eyes on him, and they looked at him with a mix of curiosity and unease. "The whole wealth is gone," Robert said next, picking his words carefully. "I gave it to a number of charities." The room broke into silence as the weight of what he said hit everyone. Emily's eyes grew wide with shock. Jake's sudden respect was broken, and Ethan's jaw clenched in anger. "You've ruined us, Dad!" Jake screamed, and his voice cracked from anger and deceit. The facade of the new peace in the family is now just a faraway mirage. The fallout was imminent, an explosive culmination of years of tension and suppressed emotions. Emily, her face contorted with a mix of anger and hurt, declared her intention to divorce, accusing Robert of deceit that cut deeper than any insults she had thrown before. "You've deceived us, Robert. I can't live with a liar," she spat. Jake and Ethan, feeling the sting of betrayal, vowed to testify against their own father. The bonds that had held the family together, fragile at best, now unraveled completely. The three of them decided to cut the last ties, kicking Robert out of the house. The door slammed shut behind him. Streetlights flickered above as Robert stood on the front porch. The road ahead was uncertain, but he carried with him the weight of a truth he could no longer contain. Even though his life was turned upside down, Robert didn't let it stop him from going on a trip away from Cedar Ridge. With the rest of his money, he went to the periphery of town, where the noise of machines was replaced by the music of nature. He found peace at the simple farm tucked away in the middle of the hills and wide fields. The old, worn home welcomed him like an old friend. As he crossed the doorway, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The smell of old wood and the sound of the floorboards spoke of stories that had been told for a long time. The change from the constant hum of the machines to the quiet rustling of leaves and the occasional lowing of cattle was freeing. With its wide fields and sky that seemed to go on forever, the farm became his safe place. There were challenges in each day, with a different rhythm. Early mornings, hands rough from working the land, and a dance with the weather that felt more like a relationship than a battle. Even though this life was simple and hard, it healed his hurt soul. Robert was sitting on the porch of his new home as the sun started to go down, making the sky a beautiful shade of orange and pink. Once controlled by the tall walls of the factory, the land now spread out in front of him like a blank canvas with endless options. The mechanical hum was replaced by the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of the leaves. At the moment, he felt peace that he hadn't felt in years. With its rough beauty and promise of a fresh start, the farm became a symbol of strength and a safe place where the sounds of his past started to fade away. As Robert tried to rebuild his life, he couldn't ignore Alinda, who had always been there for him. He had made a choice that would change his life because he knew how close they were and how much she meant to him. He chose to give Alinda 60% of his remaining wealth. "Alinda, you've been my rock during the storm. Thank you so much," Robert said. "This is for you." He looked at her eyes that were both determined and kind. She didn't know what to say, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Robert, I'm shocked that you're here. I've never met someone so kind and generous." Alinda's money worries went away, and she felt free for the first time. The factory, which had been a sign of problems, was now a distant memory. Robert's actions had made it possible for her to pursue her goals that she had long thought were impossible. As Alinda took in the enormity of this life-changing gift, Robert found comfort in the fact that he could bring a smile to the face of someone who had been there for him when the world seemed to be harsh and cruel. The adventure took Alinda to places she didn't expect to go. As she toured the busy city, she met people whose ideas changed the way she saw things. While she was shopping, she talked with Margaret, the owner of a bookstore who looked very smart. "Find something interesting?" Margaret gave a knowing smile. Alinda held up a book and nodded. "I was too busy to read before, but now I have time. Have any ideas?" she said with sparkling eyes. "Books open up new worlds. You might be able to connect to this classic." Margaret showed Alinda new things as they talked about books and life. Alinda went to a neighborhood art show later the same week. A picture caught her eye and she talked to Sophia, the artist. "Your work moves me a lot. How did you find your love for painting?" she asked. Sophia smiled when Alinda showed attention. "The things we do in life can be used to make beautiful art." As Alinda listened to these people talk, she thought about her own story. One night, she sat by the river and thought about how her life had changed. Chris, who is also a thinker, saw her thoughtful face. "Lost in thought?" Chris, who was sitting next to her, asked. Alinda was happy. "I can't believe how much life changes. Now that I'm out of the factory, I'm visiting new places." Chris gave a knowing nod. "Only change stays the same. Accept it and you'll find beauty in every turn of events." After these chats, Alinda led a meeting at the community center. Margaret, Sophia, Chris, and other people she had met on the road were invited. Alinda talked about her idea in a circle. "Because other people's kindness changed my life, I want to give people a place to share their stories, interests, and goals, so that we can push each other to live our best lives," she said. Sophia, Christopher, and Margaret all looked at each other and knew what the event meant. "Love this idea, Alinda," Margaret said first. "Feel free to include me." Sophia stated, "I believe art has the power to connect us, and I'd love to contribute." Chris smiled and said, "I support a community that celebrates all the different dreams. Do it." Alinda's network grew as people shared dreams, experiences, and the idea that every ending is a new starting. Back at our main protagonist Robert, his remaining funds went far beyond the familiar borders of Cedar Ridge. Several charities were lucky enough to receive his kindness. Robert's acts had had an effect on parts of the world he had never been to. they left a lasting mark on communities and people's lives. As a result of Robert's help, the local community groups that were almost out of resources did quite well. The programs he helped grow and expand, giving people tools and chances that had only been dreams before he appeared. The halls were filled with laughter of kids having fun, doing things that didn't seem possible before. In the field of education, new programs grew like the bright seed of a long-awaited spring. Opportunities, which were once like tiny buds waiting to open, grew into full-fledged programs who let people who had been denied access to information before learning it. When Robert looked through the updates and success stories about the charities he had given money to, he felt satisfied. The screen opened up to a world that had been changed by his deeds, a world where being kind had made things better. It used to be that the quiet times on his farm were a way for him to avoid the chaos of his past, but now they held the weight of a deep truth, that being kind to others could leave a legacy that went beyond money and family ties. The farmhouse, which was worn down by time, but still standing strong, had become Robert's refuge. The farm was turned into a sanctuary for Robert. His daily life was so different from the one he had when he worked at the factory. It was simple and normal. In the vast fields, Robert found comfort in the language of nature that he couldn't speak. Taking care of the animals and crops became more than just a chore. It turned into a healing routine that connected him to the beauty of nature's cycles. It was the smell of the freshly tilled soil, the warmth of the sun on his back as he worked outside, and the sounds of crickets in the evening that made up the quiet parts of his new life. The wind and the leaves moving in the air like two people talking to each other. "There's peace here," he would say to the fields as if they were old friends. In return, the wind would bring peaceful whispers that would echo the secrets of the ground beneath his feet. Robert found comfort in the everyday things as he sat on the porch of his home and listened to the wooden floor creak. He sipped coffee while watching the sun go down, the warm cup resting in his rough hands. The sky turned orange and pink as it did so. Peace came over him, soothing the wounds of the past that were beginning to heal in the embrace of the present. The storms were over. He would think to the setting sun, as if nature were a friend. The chaos of the factory and the chaos of family life, those are now just distant echoes. With its simplicity and peace, the farm had become not only a healing space, but also a symbol of how strong people are, and how they can find peace even when things are bad. The years went by quickly, leaving behind memories and lessons learned. Still, Robert felt a strong pull of nostalgia that made him want to go back to the place that had seen his life unfold. His family, who were just now vague memories in the back of his mind, became the focus of his interest. Robert chose to surprise his family by visiting them. He did this out of a mix of fear and a desire for peace. As he walked through Cedar Ridge's well-known streets, the town seemed both strange and incredibly familiar. He saw changes, like new shops and houses that had been painted, but the past was still there. Robert stood in front of the house as the sun set. When the door finally opened, the faces he had left behind were there. The meeting was a silent symphony of feelings, with each look like a note in a song that hadn't been sung in a long time. "Robert, is that really you?" Emily's words broke the silence with a mix of shock and disbelief. The surprised guest had been an important part of their lives, but now he seemed like a ghost from the past. The living room felt like a tomb for broken relationships. The weight of unsaid words was heavy in the air, and Robert could feel it in his chest as he sat down. There was a sad silence during the meeting, not the warm embrace he had hoped for. "Robert, where have you been all these years?" Emily's voice sounded like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Robert let out a sigh. He told them, "I needed to see how you would all react." Avoiding the angry looks that were coming his way, there was complete silence in the room. It was like they knew how hurt he felt after being lied to for so long. Emily, Jake, and Ethan's faces lit up with the truth, like a storm that had been dormant. They were about to say something, but the thought of it made them angry or sad. Each word was a painful memory of the cracks that had formed over the years. "Did you test us?" "Dad, is this some sick joke?" Jake's voice was shaking because he was mad and hurt. "It's not a joke, Jake," Robert responded. It was a test of loyalty and trust. His voice was tired, like he had been carrying a heavy load for too long. As the truth sets in, the room turned into a battlefield for feelings. People said sorry and made accusations, and the air became tense of the broken illusions. In the middle of the chaos, Robert got up from his seat because he could feel how much pain they were all in. "I needed to know where we stood as a family," he said, looking at each member of the family. "But I can see that the damage is irreparable. Cedar Ridge turned into just another town on the horizon, and he decided to leave it behind for good. The unclear and winding road ahead led him to a future that wasn't tied down by the ghosts of the past."